Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan, to Arthur Brooks and the American Enterprise Institute. Jason Delisle, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me. When I was governor, I once spoke to an audience that included Alex Haley, the author of Roots, who was a marvelous storyteller. And after I finished, Alex came up to me and said, "May I make a suggestion?" I said, "Well, of course." He said, "If, when you begin talking, you would say, instead of making a speech, I want to tell you a story, people might actually listen to what you have to say." So I've tried to remember that ever since, and have tried to begin any statement with a story, including that story. And if I had to select a story for today, it'd be a story that any one of perhaps millions of Americans who are students or who recently were students might write. This is what a college graduate paying more than $1,000 per month in student loans recently wrote to the New York Times. He said, quote, "I was told to chase down a bachelor's degree by any means necessary, but no one mentions just how expensive and soul-crushing the debt will be," unquote. The United States has most of the best colleges in the world, and it also has the most graduates paying off college debt. Roughly 40 million borrowers owe $1.5 trillion in collective student loan debt. The questions I hear most often from students about college are, 1, can I afford it? 2, is it worth it? And 3, can you make applying for financial aid and repaying student loans simpler? And then from administrators as well, they ask, can't you do something about the jungle of red tape that makes it so hard to apply for federal financial aid, to pay back student loans, and that wastes money on overhead that ought to be spent on students? And today I have 3 proposals that I hope will make answering all those questions yes. First, simplify the FAFSA. Now I have one here, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. 20 million American families fill this out every year. You do it online, but it's still 108 questions, most of them unnecessary. And assuming you fill it out and you get your Pell Grant, then about halfway through the first semester, someone calls you up and wants to verify your information and stop your money while you're doing that. So we can cut from 108 to no more than 24 the number of questions on the dreaded federal student aid application form, the FAFSA, that the 20 million families fill out every year, a prerequisite if you want a federal Pell Grant or a student loan. At our first hearing on updating the FAFSA in the Higher Education Act discussion in 2013, Kim Cook from the National College Access Network testified that just that simplification should encourage 2 million more students to apply for federal grants or loans that would make college more affordable for them. Second, a new way to repay student loans is my second proposal. We should scrap the current system of 9 different ways to repay federal loans that was described by Dr. Susan Donarski, a professor at the University of Michigan, at another one of our hearings, when she said it had become, quote, a rigid, archaic payment system that unnecessarily plunges millions into financial distress, unquote. I propose that we scrap it and replace it with 2 options, both of which would be automatically deducted from your paychecks. The option I believe most borrowers would choose is a repayment plan based upon a borrower's income, which would never require the borrower to make payments of more than 10% of his or her discretionary income. And it makes sure that if there were no money earned, there would be no money owed, and that would not reflect negatively on the borrower's credit. The other option would be a 10-year repayment plan with equal monthly payments, a lot like a 10-year mortgage. My third proposal is a new accountability system for colleges based upon whether borrowers are actually repaying their student loans. This should help lower tuition at some programs or even discourage schools from offering programs that are not worth it to students. All three of these proposals should help students afford college and make sure the degree that they earn is worth the time and money they pay for it. And I want to acknowledge Jason Delisle, from whom I stole that phrase of making college worth it. During the last 4 years, our Senate Education Committee has had 27 bipartisan hearings. They've resulted in a number of bipartisan proposals to make college more affordable and worth students' time and money. Here are a few of them. Senator Jones of Alabama and I, along with Senator Bennett of Colorado and Senator Collins of Maine, have worked on our way to simplify the FAFSA. Last year, Senator Patty Murray, who's the ranking Democrat on the committee, and I introduced and the Senate passed a bill that would have eliminated 22 of the questions on the FAFSA or allowed students to answer them with just one click. Senator Burr and King have offered a way to simplify the bewildering loan repayment system. There are a lot of other good ideas. A few of them include Senator Murphy, Enzi, Hassan are interested in expanding competency-based education programs on campuses. Professor Walter Russell Mead describes these programs as, quote, measuring whether a student is learning stuff instead of measuring how long he or she sits in their seat, unquote. Senators Grassley and Smith have proposed requiring all institutions to use uniform language and award letters so students can tell what the award is. I used to be against that because I'm pretty adverse to federal rules. But with so many students receiving letters every year that do not make it clear what you have to pay back and what you don't, I think a requirement that they do is a good idea. Senators Grassley and Smith have also proposed making it easier for institutions to counsel students about how much money they should borrow. Today, universities have handcuffs on them in that respect. Senator Cassidy and Warren have introduced legislation to collect data that would help consumers make better educated decisions on where to go to school by providing program-level information on how much debt students can take on and how much they earn after college. Last Congress, Senators Shaheen and Hatch introduced legislation to create a student loan repayment accountability system. I hope you'll notice that these senators are both Democrat and Republican in every case. I've talked with other senators on our committee who are interested in similar ideas. Senator Murphy and Warren want to expand Pell Grants to prisoners. Senators Young and Hassan are interested in experimental sites. Senator Kaine and I discussed allowing students to use their Pell Grants to pay for shorter programs. And in addition, in 2013, Senators Bennett, Mikulski, Burr, and I asked a cross-section of college administrators to recommend specific steps, not speeches, specific steps to make more effective and simplify the thousands of pages of regulations that accompany the grants and loans that help students pay for college. The result was the Kerwin-Zepost report that had 59 recommendations to eliminate what the report called a jungle of red tape that wastes money on costly overhead that could instead be spent on students. This year I've met with Senator Murray, the ranking Democrat on our committee, 9 other committee members to talk about compiling all of these ideas into a single piece of legislation and moving ahead together. My goal is to report that legislation out by this spring of our committee so the full Senate can consider it in the summer. That schedule should permit a conference with the House of Representatives on their version of reforms to the Higher Education Act so that we can produce a present for 20 million college students and their families by Christmas. Before I go into a little more detail on the 3 proposals, I'd like to mention the remarkable growth of higher education in the United States. Our system, the federal government system of grants and loans to help students pay for college, is one of the most successful federal programs, and it's certainly one of the most generous. Federal aid began with the GI Bill for veterans in 1944. As veterans came back from World War II, they were offered scholarships at the college of their choice. Then only about 5% of Americans had earned bachelor's degrees, mostly from private institutions. The GI Bill model for students taking federal dollars to the institution of their choice has expanded over the years. Congress created a limited federal loan program in 1958 and expanded federal student loans to all students in the Higher Education Act of 1965. By then, about 10% of Americans had a college degree. Then in 1972 came the Pell Grants that were created to help students from lower income families go to college. This aid has helped to make a college degree widely affordable for students to attend 6,000 institutions that are among the best in the world. Last year, 60% of our country's 20 million college students received federal aid, $28 billion in grants that they don't have to pay back, and $90 billion in new loans that they do. And today, about 35% of Americans have a bachelor's degree. That's just the federal government's generosity. That's supplemented by state government. 80% of college students today attend public institutions that receive $87 billion from the states each year. Tennessee, I'm proud to say, became the first state in the country to make 2 years of college free for everyone, an effort led by our governor then, Bill Haslam. And now we have 16 states with similar programs. And there's a vast system of private scholarships, loans, work programs to assist students who want a college education. Paying for college is never easy, but because of such generosity by taxpayers, foundations, and private individuals, paying for college is easier than many people think. In addition to the 16 states where 2 years of college is tuition-free for many students, for most students from lower-income families, 2 years of college is nearly tuition-free. The average tuition for community college in this country is $3,700. The average federal Pell Grant, which does not have to be paid back, is $3,900. Public universities have tuition levels that are reasonably low. For example, at the University of Tennessee, it's $13,000 a year. More and more private institutions, such as Vanderbilt, are guaranteeing students who are admitted that they won't have to pay more than their family can afford. And while the total student debt is large, at $1.5 trillion, for the graduate with a 4-year degree, the average student loan is just under $30,000, about the same as an average car loan. Nevertheless, despite this extraordinary generosity, many students struggle to pay for college and to pay off debts they incur to go to college. That's why I'm offering these 3 proposals today. First, simplifying the FAFSA. The cumbersome FAFSA is the major impediment to low-income students going to college in the United States today. They and their parents are intimidated by the complexity, are wary of the government form, and don't see why they should have to give to the Department of Education information they've already given to the Internal Revenue Service. The former president of Southwest Community College in Memphis told me he believes he loses 1,500 students each semester because of the complexity of the FAFSA. Now again, this is a state where tuition is free if you just fill out the FAFSA. A woman who is mentored with Tennessee's free tuition program, the Tennessee Promise Program, said the complex form has a, quote, chilling effect, intimidating parents who may themselves have never attended college and have no experience navigating the process. And over again, I've had families tell me, I've already given this information once to the federal government when I paid my taxes. Why do I have to do that again? Once ought to be enough. To make matters worse, there is the verification process that I mentioned earlier that stops the payments of Pell Grants while the family scrambles to resubmit tax information again, and the government checks to make sure that every single dot and cross letter is accurate. I recently talked with another administrator from Southwest Community College in Memphis who told me that 1/3 of the applicants who put down the school as an option on their FAFSA application were selected for this verification process last fall. At a student where over 60% of students receive Pell Grants, this is a huge burden. This is happening all across our state. The president of East Tennessee State University, at the other end of Tennessee, told me that 1/3 of his students who receive federal financial aid were subjected to this verification process this year. So I have two proposals to simplify the FAFSA. The first is Senator Jones of Alabama and I, along with Senator Bennett, who's worked with me on this for several years, and Senator Collins. We're reintroducing legislation soon that would reduce the number of questions from 108 to 15 to 25 basic questions about a student, their family, and their plans for college. We would continue to provide the information that states and institutions use to calculate additional aid to prevent students and families from having to complete additional paperwork down the line. Senator Jones and my legislation would allow students as young as middle school to easily learn about their likely Pell Grant award with a phone app or chart so they can begin to plan and think about college. The second way to simplify the FAFSA is legislation that the Senate passed last year. I mentioned that earlier as well, that Senator Patty Murray and I had introduced and which we plan to introduce again this year. This would allow families to answer up to 22 FAFSA questions with just one click. It does this by ending the need for families to give the same information to two different government agencies, the Department of Education and the Internal Revenue Service. It would also simplify the burdensome application process for the 40% of applicants who don't file federal income taxes but likely qualify for Pell Grants. It would dramatically decrease the number of students whose aid is tangled up when they are selected for the verification process that I've described. And it would eliminate, from the taxpayer's point of view, it would eliminate the estimated $6 billion in mistakes that the Treasury Department says are made each year by awarding an applicant too much or too little aid. Now, my second proposal is to help make federal loans more affordable once students graduate by scrapping the system of 9 different ways to repay your student loan and consolidate that into 2 options. The current system is so complex, that is to repay your student loan, that even college administrators have a hard time with it. At a round table at the University of Tennessee, Martin, a Tennessee college president told me that it took him months to figure out how to help his daughter repay all her federal student loans when they had the money in hand. So this new proposal would streamline those 9 plans into a new option that guarantees that borrowers would never have to pay more than 10% of their income that is not needed for necessities. And if a borrower loses his or her job and doesn't make enough to make a payment, they would not pay anything, and it would not hurt their credit score. The monthly payment would be automatically withheld from borrowers' paychecks, just like federal taxes. Now, I believe every student under this new plan will want to take advantage of this simple and affordable new option, but if not, they'll still be able to opt to pay on the existing 10-year loan repayment plan schedule, which for many borrowers will help them pay off their loans faster. And just like the new income-based repayment plan I described, they would have their payments automatically deducted from their paycheck. So let's talk about how this would work. Here's an example. Joe earned his bachelor's degree in engineering. He has the average loan for 4-year college graduates of $28,500. He makes $60,000, which is what the Census Bureau says is the median starting salary for someone with an engineering degree. He's unmarried, he has no children. So that year we take the portion of Joe's income that's needed for necessities by government formula, that's about $18,735, and what is left is what we call his discretionary income, about $41,000. Joe will pay 10% of that $41,000 a year, which is $41,027 or $343 a month. Under this proposal, if Joe, the engineering graduate, never gets a raise, he'll pay back his loan in 9 years. Now, I have some other examples. Maya, she gets a bachelor's degree in economics. She has the average loan of $28,500. But her starting salary is less, $43,000, the median starting salary for someone with a degree in economics, according to the Census Bureau. She's also unmarried, no children. So we deduct the same thing for necessities, $18,735, but she has less discretionary income to spend than Joe did. So she's going to pay less. She'll pay 10% of about $24,000, which is $2,400 a year or $200 a month. Under this proposal, even if she never gets a raise, Maya will pay back her loan in 16 years. Or Stephanie, who earns her associate's degree from a community college, $10,000 in student loan debt, the median amount a recent community college graduate would expect to have. Her starting salary is $39,000. The median salary for a 25 to 29-year-old with an associate's degree, she's unmarried, one child. So the portion of her income that's needed for necessities is larger, $25,365, because it's supporting two people. That leaves her with a smaller discretionary income to pay back her student loan, $13,000. She'll pay 10% of that, $1,364 or $114 a month. Under this proposal, she'll pay back the loan in 10 years, even if she never gets a raise. Now let's look at one other example of someone who's not able to pay back a loan. Let's take John. He went to community college for a year. He took out $7,500 in student loans, but he dropped out after his first year. He makes $20,000 a year in his job. He's unmarried, no children. So we deduct a portion of his income needed for necessities. That's almost everything he earns, $18,700. That leaves his discretionary income at $1,200. John will pay 10% of that, which is about $120 a year, $1,265 a year, $120 a month. So under this proposal, John won't have paid off his loan over 20 years. But under current law, if he's not able to pay it back over 20 years, that loan is forgiven, which seems like a policy we should keep. So under this payment system, students will have a manageable payment. Most will completely pay off their loans, which is good for the student and good for the taxpayer. And it should end the nightmare that many students have worrying how they're going to pay off their student loans. Now, finally, my third proposal is a new accountability system for college to make sure that the degrees they offer are worth students' time and money. This new accountability system would measure whether students are actually paying off their loans, the students who attend that college. The proposal would simplify and expand the so-called gainful employment rule proposed in 2014 by the U.S. Department of Education. What is different about this proposal is that it would apply to every program and it would apply to every college, public, private, and nonprofit, and the measure would be much simpler. For some programs, this should provide colleges with an incentive to lower tuition and help their students finish their degrees and find jobs so they can repay their loans. Now, I've listed a number of proposals by many senators that have bipartisan support, and one would think that we could go ahead with those and turn those into law. But there are other proposals that are going to be difficult to work with. They're good ideas, but they're hard problems to solve. One of those includes rules about campus safety. The U.S. Department of Education has proposed a rule addressing campus safety by clarifying what is required by Title IX. I'm glad to see the department is going through the rulemaking process. This allows the public to submit comments. Universities and students deserve to have certainty about what the Title IX rules are, but it's my belief that Congress can also address a number of these issues. And I'm committed to working with Senator Murray to try to do just that. We have a committee with many different voices and diverse views, but we've been successful in bringing legislation with broad bipartisan support, including fixing federal student loans a few years ago, the law fixing No Child Left Behind, which President Obama called a Christmas miracle, the 21st Century Cures Act, which Senator McConnell, the majority leader, said was the most important legislation of that Congress, and more recently, landmark legislation to combat the opioid crisis. All of these were complex, difficult issues to solve, but we were able to do what the United States Senate ought to be able to do: listen to one another, look for areas of agreement, and produce a result. So my hope is that we will be able to do that once again with higher education, that we can answer those three questions that I mentioned earlier, and barring Jason's suggestion, that we can do our best to say to 20 million families and 20 million students that yes is the answer to the question, can we make college more affordable, and can we make it simpler to apply for federal aid and to pay back loans, and can we make it worth it? Thank you very much.